Hi folks, Diana Sokolov with the San Francisco Planning Department. I'm very honored to be here with you tonight, and I'm really trying hard to make this happen. Okay, there we go. San Francisco is gearing up to produce a shared vision and strategy for how we can access and use our iconic waterfront for now and also in the future. The Waterfront Vision and Adaptation strategy is driven by the need to adapt to climate change, recognizing that our waterfront is critical to our quality of life and economy. Until the gold rush, our eastern waterfront was dotted with creeks and wetlands and looks very different from what we see today. We have lost those wetlands and those creeks, and much of the rubble from the 1906 earthquake is now bay fill. Scientists now predict that sea levels will rise on the order of 3 feet by the end of the century. Compounding this challenge is the threat of earthquakes on our historic seawall. In some of our southeastern neighborhoods, these effects are amplified by other urban stresses, such as gentrification, displacement, and physical isolation, which you heard about earlier this evening. Along our artificially built eastern waterfront, we're already seeing the effects of sea level rise and storm surge coming over our seawall. This is a photo taken very recently during a king tide in 2016. During extreme storms and high tides, overtopping occurs along our eastern waterfront at its lowest points. Erosion from sea level rise and storm surge threatens our beloved ocean beach. In 2016, the roadway literally collapsed into the ocean. This is the same roadway that protects multi-billion-dollar wastewater infrastructure, critical habitat, homes and businesses, and of course our ability to watch the sun rise and set every day over the ocean. The accelerating rate of sea level rise and extreme storms and the vulnerability of our seawall to earthquakes have the potential to threaten our shoreline and our way of life. These issues that we're facing include inundation, overland flooding, shoreline erosion, etc., and the threats will necessitate substantial changes to our shoreline over time. To give you a sense of what's at risk, by 2030, that's just 12 short years from now, for those of you who are mathematically challenged like I am, we could see 17 miles of streets, 5,800 households, more than 14,000 jobs, 240 acres of open space impacted by flooding. These effects will only be amplified in neighborhoods that are already suffering from other urban stresses, the Southern Bayfront, for instance. It's in a state of transition. While some industrial businesses will remain, this part of the shoreline is largely slated for development. Significant progress has been made in providing open space, but there are gaps. And in low-lying areas that are in many ways cut off from the rest of the city by freeways or inadequate public transportation, or both, we have an acute challenge of adapting a working shoreline to climate change while also improving the vibrancy and quality of life in our waterfront communities. Given these bisecting highways, lack of adequate transit and access, low-lying shoreline areas, we need to plan carefully to protect these areas and connect them to the rest of the city and also to the region. How we combat and adapt to climate change without sacrificing our use and enjoyment of the waterfront is really the question of the day. As you just heard, we are experiencing profound economic and demographic changes. For low-income households and communities of color along our waterfront, the need to adapt to climate change should not worsen displacement. We need to find ways to ensure that people from all incomes and backgrounds can stay here and realize the benefit of future investments. As we're confronted with climate change, we must also remain committed to a well-connected, vibrant, welcoming, resilient waterfront. With thoughtful planning and design, we can begin to see climate change as an opportunity. We can look to preserve the aspects of the waterfront that we cherish and also enhance those aspects that have room for improvement. We began this conversation 2 years ago with the publication of the Sea Level Rise Action Plan. We identified actions that the city can take in partnership with the region to meet the challenge of rising seas. This plan gave us a critical path forward to further understand and address the threat of sea level rise on our waterfront communities and our economy. After Superstorm Sandy in New York City, Rebuild by Design competition produced visionary designs that were co-developed with local communities and provide multiple benefits, such as shoreline access and protection, as well as economic opportunity. So we look to those areas around the nation and around the world for ideas and inspiration. Other places around the world have striking examples of engineered solutions. In Rotterdam, the Dutch has built the biggest mobile barrier and floodgate in the world. But massive engineering marvels are expensive, not to mention they can and do fail and cut off people from the waterfront. The effects of Hurricane Ike in 2008 were devastating to Texas. The folks who built this resilient home should be very proud, but we cannot protect San Francisco asset by asset and leave the surrounding areas vulnerable to climate hazards. We need neighborhood-based and in some cases regional solutions. In our own backyard, we're working to locally develop bold solutions that are tailored to our cultural history and our unique shoreline. Both of these extraordinary examples, we began those conversations in partnership with others, including SPUR, and introducing visual designs that demonstrate how we can meet everyone's needs and aspirations. This is Crane Cove, the proposed design for Crane Cove, and we are working with our local partners to create parks and promenades that would give everyone access to our cherished waterfront and adapt to the impacts of sea level rise. But if we delay too long or wait for disaster to strike, we risk rushing to single-purpose solutions, or worse, we'll saddle our children with $75 billion or more in the cost to replace damaged infrastructure. That number doesn't even include loss of jobs, tax revenue, or even the emotional cost of relocation. So the smiling faces that you see here remind me of who I'm planning for. Proactive and thoughtful adaptation planning will uphold the innovation and creativity that have always defined the spirit of San Francisco. The significant changes along our shoreline, the entire length of our shoreline, demand our attention now. Thank you very much for your time.